So when I go to schools that are predominantly Latino, and I see the kids' eyes widen when they see me. And, we kind of like exchange that glance. There's like this little moment where they look at me and I look at them, and it's just like, yeah, I'm like you. I'm just like you. And I love that because a lot of those kids, they like don't usually see themselves in the classical music world.
Hello, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 85, an interview with Viviana Cumplido Wilson. Powell Flutes has crafted handmade flutes and piccolos in the Boston area since 1927. From the intermediate Powell sonare to the professional handmade custom, the highest level of attention is given to creating artistic quality instruments reflective of Boston's flute heritage. Powell's dedication to the balance of tradition and innovation results in flutes, head joints, and piccolos that combine the coveted Powell sound with the demands of the modern flutist. This commitment to excellence has resulted in internationally acclaimed instruments that have made the Powell sound the gold standard amongst musicians around the world. Visit powellflutes.com to see their entire line of instruments and to find the dealer nearest you. Welcome everyone to another Flute 360 podcast episode. I am here today with the wonderful Viviana Cumplido Wilson, who is the principal flutist of the Phoenix Symphony. Welcome, Viviana.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so glad to be here with you today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So what have you done this past weekend? Anything fun and exciting?
Well, let's see. I'm getting ready for the Phoenix Symphony season to start. So it's been a lot of preparing music for the next few weeks of concerts. So yeah, just kind of getting ready for things to start back up.
That's awesome. I bet it's a busy time for you. So for those who may not know you, can you please share with the listeners who you are and your musical background?
Sure. Well, I am, like you said, Viviana Cumplido Wilson. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I did not grow up in a musical family per se, but my grandmother was an avid classical music fan. So she was the one who really introduced me to music as a very, very, very young child, and I fell in love with it, much to her delight. And so we shared that bond for, our whole relationship up until she passed at the age of 94. So basically, she bought me my first piano and really encouraged me to study music. And, when I got into flute, she was also very supportive of that. And so she pretty much got me going in this career path, although, she probably never envisioned me actually becoming a professional, but she, of course, loved it. So I went to the New World School of the Arts High School in Miami, which is a wonderful public magnet school. And that really got me ready to then go on to New England Conservatory for my undergrad. I did my master's at USC, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And you are a Powell artist.
I am.
Yeah. Powell has been so gracious and said, we want to support a Flute 360 series. And they said, we need for you to talk to Viviana. She is an amazing woman. And they were so stoked to bring you to the platform so people can hear about you and your story. I'm so grateful to Powell. They've been so supportive, even when I was a student and I'd, just gotten my first job. I just won, and that was with the Tucson Symphony. And I was playing on this not so professional instrument. And I remember at the time it was Stephen Finley who was doing a class or something in LA, and he heard me playing. It was just like, we need to get this kid a better flute. And so he really, helped, and the, Powell family helped made that happen for me. And ever since then, it's just been the instrument that I always want to go back to. Wow. Even when I try other instruments, there's so many awesome flutes out there, and it really just comes down to what works for you. And Powell has always just been the way that I've found my voice, so to speak. Nice. Actually, full circle, I was in Tucson when you were the principal flutist.
You were?
Yeah.
Were you at the U of A?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, I was studying with Brian Luce, and I was there my junior and senior year for undergraduate studies. And that was 2005, 2007.
Okay. So that was right at the end of my time in Tucson, because then I came up to Phoenix in 2006.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, small world.
It really is.
Yeah, how neat. So speaking of your career, you've had an extensive one. And as we all know, as professionals and or students, wherever you are in life right now, there are ups and downs. So before landing your jobs, was there a point in your profession that you wanted to give up? If so, what helped you to get through that season in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's something that everybody, all kinds of performers, whether it's in the arts or athletes, we all struggle with these ups and downs because, we work so hard, we practice so much doing our thing, and, it doesn't always go our way.
Yeah.
And so, we hit these stretches where it just feels like, oh my God, it's never going to happen for me. And I think, the best thing you can do, I mean, for one thing, it's good to have an honest assessment of yourself, because there's sometimes it's like, could I be better? Could I be doing things better? And reaching out to people that you trust to listen to you and get some feedback, like some really honest, hopefully kind, but, still just being very realistic about like, okay, well, what is going on? Is there something fundamental, or is it just, my head's not in, the right place or something like that. So it's great to always get some feedback that way. And then also just seeking other types of, sort of, I guess, help in terms of working on your mental game too, so that you're sort of, not feeling super down in the dumps. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe talking to somebody is good for that. Maybe getting some like sort of sport coaching, but for what we do is good for things like that, just to kind of give you different tools to help you when things aren't quite going your way, so it doesn't completely defeat you, because then you just don't want to do anything, right? So thankfully, I've always, felt like I never felt like giving up for sure, but I definitely had times where I was just like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, and sort of reminding yourself that it's like, okay, no, like you've had, so many people have really taken you under their wing because they believe in you and all of that. And, it's like, trust them, trust your practice, trust yourself, and trust your instincts. And then, eventually you can kind of, hopefully all of those things will align and you'll get back into your best shape.
Yeah. No, I love that. And the thing that I want to highlight is the mental aspect that you just mentioned. I just competed in Romania this past summer. And
cool.
Yeah, it was a really neat experience. And my repertoire was prepared very well. And the one thing I learned from that competition was the mental aspect. And I found that mentally, maybe I could be stronger, because the minute I got on stage, it was live stream. And I saw that camera right in front of my face. I thought, oh boy. And so after that experience, I said, okay, I'm going to start toughening up the mental side of my performances, and just reading books and reaching out to, sooner or later, I want to dive into this, just like a sports psychology expert, because it is so much a part of what we do as musicians.
Yep. No, it really is. And I mean, there's so many wonderful resources out there. Even something that I've used in more recent years is doing meditation, things like that. And there's a great app called Headspace that I've used, where it's sort of a guided thing. And there's so many different mindful meditations that are like for specific things. It could be anything from like performance anxiety to depression to just everything, any sort of, fear of flying, whatever it is, they've got something, to help you kind of work through it, and, concentration, all of that stuff. And that I found really helpful, just to kind of get myself mentally in the right place to then do what I do, because I suffer a lot from like the chatter in my head. I mean, no one can distract me like myself. Like I am great at doing that. So, the more I can like get out of my own way, the better off I am. And, and I love also watching, professional athletes. Like we just we're watching the U.S. Open tennis, which I love. I look forward to it every year, and just seeing all of these really, really, really high achieving, elite athletes doing something very similar to what we do. I mean, this is, it's been talked about a lot, the book, The Inner Game of Tennis and all of that. It's very similar. But watching them in that kind of arena, figuring out how to regroup and come back and, not let whatever point they lost or something, get them down and potentially come back and win the whole thing. It's really remarkable. And I always try to think about that. It's like, when we're performing, it's all happening in real time. You're going to make a mistake. You might do something you didn't love. And how quickly can you just regroup so that you don't just, throw the rest of the performance away. It's like, no, you can save this. You can still make this awesome. So just being able to mentally turn it around is a huge, huge tool and advantage.
I love that. Awesome. So before we get into your niche of being an orchestral flutist, I'm going to throw out there a blanketed question. Okay. Any advice for flutists who are pursuing a musical career as their profession?
Sure. I mean, obviously, aside from practicing, I think it's important to kind of figure out what your niche is, what you gravitate towards. Like we all have different strengths as musicians and as flutists, and so maybe not everybody loves playing in an ensemble. So what else can you do as a musician? What else? I feel like it's easy to sort of have it dictated for you, be like, okay, well, I play the flute, so these are my options. I can, try to be a soloist or play an orchestra. And more you're seeing people who are really thinking outside that box and coming up with, really innovative ways of performing and becoming, these great artists. And I think it's important to just kind of be open to it. Doesn't mean that, everybody has to have some new trick, but I think it's important to just kind of think about what that would look like. Or, I mean, if you're dead set on like, I want to play in an orchestra, well, then seek out the people who, do that well and are preparing people well for that kind of a career. I think I was really, really lucky having the teachers that I had. I'm always like, I think about that all the time. I'm so grateful that I just had the right teachers for me. There's so many great teachers out there, but it just really depends on who you are, what you're seeking out in a musical career. And I think finding the right guidance is, crucial to making whatever your musical career goals are possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just realizing that and finding what you said, finding what excites you and finding your niche, you're going to bloom in that field.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, even when I finished my master's in 2009, trying to find my path and trying to find where do I fit into this, orchestral auditions scare the bejeebies out of me. And I love the orchestral scene, like, the winds and the strings and the whole collaboration. I think it's gorgeous. But for me, like, it wasn't for me. And so for a while, I would beat up on myself and say, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And then I stopped. I thought, wait a second. Look at my education and look at the teachers who have prepared me. All of my teachers, they're wonderful players, but everything was so educationally based, and then that's when I pursued my DMA and I said, I really have a passion for teaching collegiate students and being in academia. So you have to find something that works for you and your strengths.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, because otherwise you're just trying to fit in to a mold that doesn't suit you.
Yeah.
And that'll only get you so far and you're just going to be heartbroken all the time.
Yeah, I second that. Yeah. Oh, shoot. So now going into your realm, since you are an orchestral flutist, any suggestions for audition preparation and or the day of the audition?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the main thing for me is, and what I try to impart on students or whoever, comes and plays, if they're preparing for an audition, is to really focus your attention on the things that you can control. It's very easy to sort of spiral into like, oh, well, is this person taking this? Or, oh, who's on the committee? Or like, what do you think they want this or that? It's just like, okay, you are thinking about variables that you have zero control over. So what you can do is prepare the best you can, listen to recordings of that orchestra so you have a general sense of how they do things, tempo, style, stuff like that. But really, your preparation is what you can control. And so making sure that you are ready to play the best you possibly can for that, will already, make you feel so much more confident going into it. And then, in the preparation, I always advise, mock auditions are key, and trying to simulate the audition process itself so that it becomes like routine, so that it feels normal, so that when you get to the thing, it's not like, oh God, here we go. But it's just sort of like, I've done this, dozens of times already, and it just sort of feels a little bit more routine. So even just doing them by yourself, for a recording device and picking out, excerpts from a hat or something, just so that, you have the element of surprise, you've got a recording device, so then you can also listen back and see how it really went. Because there's the feeling of like what you think you did. And then when you listen back and sometimes you're like, oh, actually that was maybe a lot better than what I thought. Or, oh no, I didn't realize I was doing X, Y, Z. And you can really be very accountable for all of these details. And it really makes you so efficient too, because there's so much that you can learn just from recording yourself. So all of that is really, really essential. And then in terms of like the day of and all of that, again, routine, like making sure that, and wearing something that you're comfortable in, like don't pick out a new dress, like wear something that it's like, okay, I'm not going to be distracted by this garment. I don't need something that all of a sudden you'd be like, oh, this is going to like potentially make me feel weird. Stick to things that work for you. And so that way, again, all of it will feel very normal. Really, it's just kind of like controlling all of the variables that, you can, so that you feel really, really comfortable and confident. And ultimately you're going to go in, and if you can go and play the way you wanted to, that's a win. It won't feel like it if it doesn't go your way, but knowing that you went in and did the thing that you prepared, that's a huge victory, and that's something that you'll continue to build on.
Yeah, definitely. You showed up and you gave your best, and if you took the time to prepare for that event, you should feel very proud of the work and the progress up to that point, or to the day of that recital or audition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's awesome. Today's sponsor is brought to you by J&K Productions. Did you know that not only are they a production company for podcasts, but they are a recording company for musicians? Any musical recording needs that you may have, J&K Productions can fulfill that need. They have all the necessary equipment and expertise to record your next flute recording for college or graduate auditions, competitions, summer festivals, or a flute album. J&K Productions can record any setup imaginable, from solo flute, small chamber, flute and piano, and much more. Consider J&K Productions for your next recording project. Contact them at jkproductions.media. Okay, so it is very much related to music. For the younger students, you might not see the direct connection, but let's step outside of the music realm just a little bit, and let's talk about your community service.
Sure.
Yeah, you've donated a lot of your time to Hospice of the Valley. How did you come across this organization, and what's the inspiration behind your volunteer work?
Yeah, so I've been volunteering for Hospice of the Valley for, I think, almost 6 years now. And I really, for a while before I started volunteering, I wanted to do something and trying to figure out, what I was suited for and what would be a good fit. And when I learned about Hospice of the Valley, they're a not-for-profit organization, and their mission is to provide comfort and dignity as life nears its end. And, while most people associate hospice with, just imminent death, like Hospice of the Valley is really focused on the living part, making sure that the patients and their families have the best quality of life up until the end. And I really just thought, they've got such a great mission. And because they're not for profit, if you qualify medically, if you're sort of classified as a hospice patient, they, even if you don't have the means, like they will treat you. And so they really, they do so much wonderful work in this community. And so that's where I decided, I wanted to be a part of that. And the volunteers play a huge role in this organization because we do anything from socializing with patients, who maybe don't have a lot of visitors, or respite care for the family, the caregivers, which, I mean, if you've ever had an ailing parent, grandparent, or something, it's a huge, it can really turn a family's life upside down, especially if they don't have the resources to have extra help. So, we can be that extra help so they can go do food shopping or get a haircut, running errands for patients if they live by themselves and they can't, drive, someone's got to get them groceries, things like that. So there's really a lot of wonderful things they do. And another branch of Hospice of the Valley that I'm also involved with is called Ryan House. And it's a pediatric respite facility for kids that have life-limiting illnesses. And they also do provide hospice care as well. And so there it's very similar. It's a lot of actually like really happy playtime and just engaging with kids that, I initially didn't want to be a part of Ryan House because I thought it was going to make me really sad.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually first went there through the Phoenix Symphony playing an outreach concert with a small ensemble. And I thought, okay, well, I'll see what this is about finally, and it was so lovely. And the people there are so wonderful. And it's just set up in this way where, all of these kids who have whatever limitations they may have can do stuff. And I just thought, oh, okay, like this is way different than what I imagined. And, I kind of want to be a part of this too. So I do what I can and help out when I can. And I always really I love, being a part of that. And it feels good to just have a responsibility that is not about me.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to just sort of, if you have the opportunity, it's a great thing to just have something that's, not about yourself for a little bit.
Yeah. It kind of gets you out of your own little bubble. We as humans, we tend to, especially musicians, because we're practicing in a practice room for so many hours, right?
Yeah.
And you come out and you look at the sun and you think, oh my gosh, I'm such a hermit. But to get yourself out of that bubble and, we tend to, even in, the beginning of the interview, we're talking about maybe low seasons of our life where we don't have that job yet. We can get sorry for ourselves. But if you kind of step outside of that and say, oh, there are other people in need of help and I can offer something. I can, take a friend to their doctor's appointment with a car because they don't have a vehicle, but I do. Yeah. You can use your resources to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think for balance, at least for me, it's nice to have, to be useful in a non-musical way too. Because we do a lot of outreach and community work through the symphony, and I'm always, I'm delighted to be a part of that. But I definitely, just for my own, again, life balance, I was like, okay, I need to have an activity that's, doing something for someone else that doesn't involve me playing the flute just for a little bit, just so that I know that I'm like useful in other ways. And, but it's good. And it's good to just have a break too, because it's very easy. There's so many things that you can do as a musician that are outreach related and they're so useful and wonderful, so it's easy to kind of fall into that and just be playing all the time. And I definitely, for my own like mental clarity and sanity, sometimes you just need to have something that gives you a little break from that.
I love that. And then to bring it full circle for the younger students, this is the tagline. Viviana's saying, I feel like a better human being and I feel more well-rounded. Well, if you feel more well-rounded, then you're going to be a better teacher for your students. Right. And then
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the full circle there.
Oh, and there's so much that, needs to be done in every community.
Yeah.
I mean, through the symphony, our outreach programs go to homeless shelters, they go to other medical facilities. We've done some amazing research projects with ASU for doing some dementia research with the effects of music on dementia patients, which was really amazing. And there's so much that one can do. And if you want to do it through music, it's great. You've got this tool, but there's always someone out there that needs help.
Yes. Beautifully said. Thank you.
Sure.
So you are a runner. Please share how you got into running and training for triathlons.
I am a runner.
You are. I'm a runner too.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I got into it recently. It was during my DMA. Lisa Garner-Santos said, Heidi, you are going to start running and no ifs, ands, or buts. And so I did. But anyways, how has your passion for health influenced who you are as a musician?
Well, I started running when I got to Phoenix, actually. I'd always just kind of, gone to the gym. And when I moved to Phoenix, I was kind of getting tired of gym classes and things like that. And I vividly remember like seeing a commercial for the PF Chang's like marathon and half marathon that happens here in January. And I remember thinking like, could I run a half marathon? Like at that point, I'd never run more than like 3 or 4 miles. So I was just like on a treadmill and, I was just like, no. And so I was kind of like thinking about it. And when I started work, this all happened before my first day of work in Phoenix. When I started work, then I remember, you meet people in the orchestra. And then I, at some point, must have said something to someone that I was like thinking about starting running or something. And before I knew it, there was like actually this great little community of runners in the symphony that just took me under their wing and was like, oh, this is what we do. And before I knew it, like I think before my first month of work was even done, I was already signed up for like a 5K, a 10K, a 10 miler, and that half marathon, and I had this like great little club of people, that were just like more than happy to, run with me, even though I was like new and slow. And, it's just like, oh God, I've always felt I was not an athletic kid. So it was just, I'm not a natural athlete. So I was definitely feeling out of my element. But, again, the community aspect of it is wonderful. And, so it was, once I started running, and then one of my friends from the symphony, violist named Karen B, she's done several triathlon and Ironman races. And so she, was the one that really helped me get into triathlon. She's so experienced. And so, little by little, it's like, you start with like the baby one, the sprint, and then it's like, okay, as I get more comfortable. And so she really, held my hand through all of that, which is great, and it's again, like the sort of like mentorship of it, where you go from being, the one who's sort of learning all the things. And then one day you wake up and you're the experienced one and you make a new friend who's never run a race and you're like, oh, this is what we do, and it just kind of like you pay it forward. And it's a great community to be a part of.
That's awesome. You might really like the book, A Brave New Athlete by Dr. Murphy, I think is his last name.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, it was my pick for episode 82 with Robert Dick. And they talk about the physical challenges of, being an athlete in a specified sport, the mental side to it. And he's, an expert. He has his doctorate in this field. And so it's really neat to see him dive into it with his wife.
All right. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out.
Cool. So let's go to the second part of the question. How has your passion for health influenced who you are as a musician?
For me, I think it's the discipline of training is not too, it's not unlike the discipline it takes to, become a professional musician. You've got to practice, you do the thing. And I loved that, the structure of training plans, it's like so objective. And it's like, if you do X, Y, Z, you will most likely, barring any injury or illness, you will get your goal. And it was just like so clear cut and so just like, oh my God, this is possible, whereas like sometimes as a musician, you feel like you do all the right things and you don't get the prize at the end. And that can, be a little bit anticlimactic, a bit of a letdown. And so just having, these training routines where I knew like that goal was going to be accomplished was incredibly like cathartic. It's just like, oh, I know I'm going to get the thing that I am training for. But in terms of music too, I mean, when I think about it now, it's like sometimes when I'm practicing, if I have a certain goal in mind or something, I sort of think of it in terms of like, well, I need a training plan. Like I need a practice plan, and it's really helped me sort of organize how I practice for things and looking at, sort of like the long term. So it's like, okay, well, if your performance is on this date, 3 months down the line, well, where do you want to be 1 month out? Where do you want to be? Like, just kind of having these little goalposts along the way so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And it really helps just kind of structure and prioritize and all of those things. I really, I like kind of taking a very athletic approach sometimes to my practice.
No, I agree. Yeah, definitely. And don't you just love that runner's high?
Yeah. No, I mean, it feels, and also just for our physical well-being, as instrumentalists, even though obviously we're not playing the flute with our legs, but the cardiovascular side of it, obviously for our, breathing and all of that is wonderful. But even just the circulation, like for me, I get a lot of neck and shoulder tension and all that kind of stuff. And just getting out there and moving, like all of that will feel so much better. And then I'm like, okay, now I can get to work. Now I can do my thing. Yeah.
The reason I say that is just because after I run and then like clean up and then go play the flute, I feel so confident. Like, I can do anything. And I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to get my students to jump on this bandwagon with me because it's addicting,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. Everybody, I think it's important to do something physical.
For sure.
Find something that works for you, that you're into, so that you just have an outlet. It's great for, and it's great for your mental health too. I mean, I think in the UK, I remember reading a study where doctors were prescribing exercise as an antidepressant. Like, this is, a really valuable thing for your overall health, not just, your physical health.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. So I have some social media questions from the listeners.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Rachel Chen says, how can we keep classical music alive in our modern society?
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? That's what every arts organization is trying to figure out. But, I think truly education and exposure are key to this. The more people, have, especially young exposure to music, as young students, even if they didn't necessarily get to play an instrument, but just sort of know about it, get to like go to performances and things like that, all of a sudden the awareness that this exists is huge. If they don't even know about it, of course, why would they even investigate, and then of course, if they can learn about music, maybe play an instrument, things like that, then they're like directly connected, they're involved. And while they may not even remotely pursue it past elementary or junior high or whatever, they always, how many times have you met someone who's like, oh my God, I played the flute. I loved it so much. I love going to concerts. Yeah. They got to do the thing and now they want to, enjoy it, as an adult because they had this great experience when they were growing up. So I think that's a big part of it. And then, in our sort of modern society, I think making sure that we're using like modern mediums to sort of get ourselves out there and for people to know about us. So whether it means, doing stuff like this, podcasts so that people get to know about, what flute players are up to and all of that, broadcasting concerts on the internet so that there's a little bit more exposure that way. All of these things, it's just kind of, building your audience in a new way because that's the world we live in. I mean, that's, at least this is part of it. Obviously, everyone's trying really hard to get as much as exposure as they can. But I think, instead of kind of resisting the technology and all of that, I feel like it can all just be used to our advantage to help promote what we do so that people, can have a great experience. And also, I think another thing too is sometimes, especially if people are really new to classical music, I think it's important to kind of give people permission to maybe not like something. I think everyone's worried about like not getting it or not, feeling like maybe I just don't know enough about this to like it. It's like you can objectively dislike something on your own. You don't have to be informed about it. But then, you might not like one thing, but there's so much. And that's where I feel like, again, exposing people to a huge range of classical music, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, I liked that. Okay. Like, I want to hear more of that. And then they realize just there's so much more to offer than, maybe what their initial experience was or something like that, or whatever they think they might be afraid of and trying to go to a concert or something. I think, it's just, and that's something that I think orchestras nowadays, we're trying really hard to make sure that we are balancing these programs and, so that we offer a wide variety so that it can appeal to a large audience and still be doing what we feel is artistically important for our musical world.
Yeah, I agree. The Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, I think a few days ago, put on a concert like throwback music from like the 1970s or something. And I kid you not, a former flute parent of mine she said in her Facebook post, I have not been to the symphony in such a long time, but I had to go to this because they were playing all my favorite tunes, and so it related to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to meet them where they're at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. On to the next social media question. Jolene Madewell says, I personally would love to hear about any setbacks and failures in auditions, competitions, or as a teacher.
Oh my. Well, I've definitely had more failures than wins. And I think that's probably the case for most of us. But within that, I can think of specifically one time there was an audition that I took where I remember I got cut after the first excerpt. That had never happened to me before. And that just felt like a giant gut punch. I was like, oh my God, do I suck? Am I really bad at this now? It was really, I was floored, and it's not like I expect to make it to the finals every time or something like that. But, I kind of was like, wait a minute, what just happened? Yeah. And, once like that initial shock kind of passed, it made me really think about like, okay, well, maybe there's something fundamental going on in my playing that just, really like knocked me out of the game early on. And they were like, nope, we're not interested. And so it just, the more you can kind of use the experience to try to learn from it, even if it was really painful, to just sort of reflect a little bit and be like, okay, because I've been on that other side of the screen. And I know, like, if I, for me personally, like sound is a really big thing. If I like the sound quality, if it's got energy and direction and all of that stuff, I'm listening. If it's lacking that, then I might not be super interested. And, we might be done sooner than that person might have liked. And, and so that made me really think about like, okay, well, is there something going on like that with me? And so just, kind of really going back and doing some serious fundamental work and just, making sure that things were organized in my playing so that when I went back to, do it again, I felt like, okay, maybe I've course corrected, hopefully, and, I'll have more success next time. But yeah, it does not feel good. It really doesn't. And it's something I think about too, when I'm sitting on the other side is like, the moment you say that, thank you, if it comes too soon, it's like, you've just like crushed someone, and yeah, it's really, it's tough.
Yeah.
So,
but you can be sympathetic to that person then and think, oh man.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And and that's something I try really hard. Like I'm usually, a lot of auditions, they won't give feedback. Like, the Phoenix Symphony, like if the committee members, like, if they offer feedback, usually I'm one of them just because I feel like it's so hard to learn otherwise, if you don't know what you did wrong or what happened, like, it's hard to understand. You always like leave there wondering like, I thought that was good, or maybe it was this one thing or whatever. And then you get some feedback and you're like, oh, it had nothing to do with that. It was, this other thing, and then all of a sudden you can really like learn and grow from that. So I'm always so appreciative when people are willing to give comments and feedback, because it just makes such a huge difference. And, it's made a huge difference for me the few times I get to get feedback and I know it's helpful for everyone else. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's so kind of you. The next question is from Leah Stevens, and she says, I'm not sure if she'd feel comfortable answering, but I'd love to know her experiences in the music industry as a woman, specifically a woman of color.
Sure. Well, there's been a lot in our musical news about, pay equity issues and things like that. And I feel like that's absolutely worth talking about. And certainly I'm no stranger to having, struggles in those types of departments. But in the spirit of keeping things positive and happy, I would like to take a positive spin to this question, which is I've gotten to witness through various educational programs that, I participate in through my job, the power of representation. So when I go to schools that are predominantly Latino, and I see the kids' eyes widen when they see me, and, we kind of like exchange that glance. There's like this little moment where they look at me and I look at them, and it's just like, yeah, I'm like you. I'm just like you. And, and I love that, because a lot of those kids, they like don't usually see themselves in the classical music world. And so all of a sudden they're like, is this a thing that's available to me?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know. And one of my favorite experiences, and this is in Tucson. This is the first time I really realized how important this is, that I played, our quintet. The Tucson Symphony has a, woodwind quintet that would do a lot of education shows. And one of the schools that we went to, we were friends with the music teacher there. And, we played for the kids, and they were super enthusiastic, and they were all, lovely and delightful. And, they sent us a bunch of like cards and pictures after, the fact. And I remember when we got the thing, and, at that time I was not especially, dynamic in those types of performances. I really I was a little bit, awkward in front of an audience and things like that. So usually it was my other colleagues who would get like tons of fan mail from the kiddos, but in this school, it was mostly for me. And I was like, huh? And I was like, that's weird. And our friend who was the music teacher there, she's like, no, baby. She's like, you don't understand. She's like, all of those kids came up to me and they were just like, Miss, she's brown like us.
Oh.
And she was like, I have a whole class of kids now that want to play flute, and, and they played flute, and it was, I really just had no idea. And it meant so much. And that now I really I'm very aware of this.
Yeah.
When I go into schools, and especially in schools that maybe aren't predominantly Latino, but, you see one or two, little brown kids, and, we see each other and we have that moment where it's just sort of like, yeah, I'm here, and we can share this experience. You can do this too.
Wow. How amazing the impact you can have on the younger generation.
Yeah. And really, again, the representation thing, it really is when people talk about it, it can be easily dismissed if you've never had that direct experience, so just to know that I could be a part of that and to sort of, be a face for these kids, it's very meaningful.
That's amazing. Awesome. Okay, two more. This is from Laura Pillman, and she says, I'd love to know how she feels her workouts / running affect her playing, or anything running related.
Absolutely. Well, we talked a little bit about how good we feel after we run. And, sometimes if I'm training for something longer, like a marathon or whatever, and, you're doing a weekly long run, and even though those days I know I'm going to be tired later, my breathing feels amazing.
Yeah.
I just feel so open. So even if I have to go play a concert after that or something, I'm just everything is just I feel like the airways are perfectly clear, and I just have all the breath control in the world after doing something like that. And I think it's also important, I try to balance it out with a fair amount of strength training, which is ultimately injury prevention. Doing any sort of upper body strength training, whether it's weights or, other activities. I get bored very easily. So I'm always like doing something new and ridiculous. So I've, past few years, I take an aerial class once or twice a week, which is like, like the Cirque du Soleil, like aerial silks, fabrics. It's ridiculous. I can barely do anything, but it's really good at trying to strengthen your upper body. But it's also giving those muscles that are, new information. And that's part of the whole injury prevention. Like if you only do one thing, if you only hold yourself one way, then those muscles will fatigue. They're not getting any new information. So just using them in different ways really makes a big difference and has kept me, pretty healthy in my career. So
that's awesome.
So I definitely, I'm very pro exercise.
And that strength training is a thing, because I remember working with a physical therapist who happens to also have her DMA in flute, and her name is Dr. Susan Fang.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and she resides in Texas. But when I was starting to have warning signs of my thumb hurting, I went right to somebody who knew, because I didn't want it to snowball, out of control. And she checked my back and she put her hand between my shoulder blades and she goes, "Heidi, you've got no muscles between your shoulder blades. We have to beef up your back."
Yep.
And so, it's all related. And so I wish I knew that information when I was younger, So that's actually series 1 of this podcast is all health related and diet, exercise, prevention of performance related injuries, because that's one of my passions too. Yeah, no, it's such a huge part of what we do. It's like, people don't necessarily think of being an instrumentalist as a physical profession, but it is, it's just not on the same scale as like a professional athlete, of course, but what we do is physical. And, it's always really frustrating and sad when you see, your friends have to like take time off or something, because of an injury, because of playing, so the more you can do to hopefully prevent that, the longer your career will be. Yeah, for sure. And last question from Martin Godoy. How did you come to choose your flute? Was it a result of your flute instructor lineage? What does being an artist mean to you? Sure. Well, in terms of my flute instructor lineage, my teacher at New England Conservatory was Fenwick Smith, who was himself a Powell player and formal Powell flute maker. So yeah, he made his flute that he played on. And I remember when I borrowed like the school's flute which was the James Papatsakis flute. And I remember the first time I brought it to my lesson because mine was, getting worked on or something. And he was like, "Oh, did they tell you who made that flute?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "Me." So yeah, he was, very proud of his flute making career. But yeah, so I mean, I definitely, sort of felt connected to the Powell family through Fenwick. So yeah, so when it came time for me to finally like have my own big girl flute, trying a lot of things, I always gravitated to Powell. Again, it just felt like me. And I think that's really the key thing. I mean, you can always, you can pretty much pick up anything and like sound good. It's just what you feel the most comfortable with, and what for me allowed me to play the way I wanted to play. I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't feel like I'm fighting this instrument. This instrument is working with me." And so it's just always, always ended up, being a Powell girl, because I always feel like that lets me do what I want to do. Yeah. So yeah. And I love that I get to be a Powell artist and that they're so supportive of, the really wide range of interesting, flutists on their roster. You've got a really kind of eclectic mix of people up there. So it's like they're really proud of all of the different ways that people are, playing Powell flutes and having really interesting careers. Yeah. I get to talk Thursday with Hilary Abigana through the Fourth Wall Ensemble. Yeah. That's a serious out of the box. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. I can't even imagine. Yeah. But when you said colorful palette of artists through the Powell family, I couldn't agree more, and then just like Nicole Chamberlain being flutist / composer, and I think the mix is important to showcase everyone's strengths. Yeah. And it's great that, that
they provide instruments that lend themselves to so many different, such a wide variety of musical careers.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the last portion of Martin's question was, what does being an artist mean to you?
Oh, well, it's interesting. I don't usually call myself an artist other than Powell Artist. But, I feel very lucky that I get to do this, really, and the fact that I play an instrument that, allows me to sort of express myself. I mean, I think about whether or not, if I could go back, people like to ask if you could go back and pick another instrument, would you pick something else? And I don't think I would. I think, I really love being a flutist and love what I can do with that instrument. And so for me, it was just sort of, I feel lucky that I found the one that was right for me and that I get to play this wonderful music and, share it the way I want to share it. The fact that you can have your own unique voice in all of this. And it's very sort of personal that way, but the fact that I can also share that and, you just never know who you're going to reach in an audience. And that to me is also really special. That's a unique position to be in where you could be playing for an audience somewhere and, you might reach someone who maybe wasn't all that interested, or maybe they remember like that melody from something and it's really meaningful and they have this like great, like emotional experience that they weren't expecting. It's just, it's really interesting that I have this tool that I can reach people in different ways.
That's beautifully said. And that's a great way to end the interview with just that notion of serving the community with your art and being an artist, and your tool is the flute, and we get to express ourselves in that way.
Yeah, no, I feel very, very lucky.
How neat. So in the last segment of the show, I do a portion called Picks. Do you have some picks that you would like to share to the listeners today?
I do have some picks. I have 3. I hope that's not too many.
No, not at all.
So the first is the Zahav Cookbook, which is my husband and I, we love cooking, and we were gifted this book. My mother-in-law gave it to us a couple years ago, and I was a little intimidated by it because it's a Israeli cuisine, which is not something I was familiar with preparing. And so when I finally dove into this book, it just seemed like all of a sudden, every single meal that we were eating from this was just insanely fabulous and so delicious and also not complicated. It's a very user-friendly cookbook. Like when I've told people about it, it's like, you just need like a few little pantry ingredients that you could get like at a Middle Eastern market or probably order on Amazon. And then you'll be ready to make all of this amazing food. And most of it is actually very healthy. But we are obsessed with this book. The restaurant Zahav is in Philly, and we got to go there a couple of years ago, which was also wonderful. So I'm a big fan of this book. And one of my favorite things to make from it is the twice cooked eggplant, which the first time I made it, didn't really care about eggplant at all, but everyone said this was like the thing to make. So I made it. And I remember the first time we had it, I just about cried into my plate. I loved it so much. So ever since then, it has been, heavy on the rotation in our house.
I cannot wait to make this dish. If a dish can make me cry in my plate, I am all for it.
Yeah, no. Seriously, this is like a game changer in how we eat in our house. So yeah, the Zahav Cookbook.
Oh, perfect. I cannot wait. Oh, shoot.
Okay, so my next pick is author Atul Gawande, he is a surgeon and writer, and he does a lot of public health research. And he wrote, the first thing I read of his was actually when I was training for Hospice of the Valley, and his book Being Mortal, which was something that was kind of recommended. And it sort of discusses like a lot of, end of life choices and assisted living and all this stuff, which doesn't sound like an especially uplifting book or anything like that. But he's such a brilliant writer and such a compassionate and beautiful storyteller that he writes this book in such a way that it's totally compelling. And, I was just like, I learned so much. I cried, like the whole thing, so basically every book I'm going to talk about, there's crying involved evidently, but, so yeah, that. And then I recently read the Checklist Manifesto, which he wrote, which discusses like the importance of organization and pre-planning, such as through checklists in both medicine and the larger world, which again, sounds like it is just like a manual for OCD people, but it is incredibly compelling. And he's just such a great storyteller. And I learned so much. So I'm a big fan. Basically anything he writes or any TED Talks that he does, I'm all for it. So
awesome.
So there's that. And then my last pick is actually another podcast, non-flute related, and that would be Getting Curious with Jonathan Van Ness. If you have not checked this out, I am constantly entertained and delighted and learning about so many things that I didn't think I would care about. Jonathan Van Ness, I don't know if you know who he is. He's one of the Queer Eye guys.
No, I do not.
And yeah, so his podcast, he basically, wants to know about things. And so he'll invite these experts about various things. I mean, anything from like water quality issues with Erin Brockovich, or like, what does the district attorney do? Or, like learning about snakes or therapy clowns. I mean, it's so like varied, and I love it. I love it. I learned so much. And I think part of what makes it so delightful is that he's giving you permission to feel okay about not knowing things. It's like, hey, we're here and we're all learning about this together. Because sometimes it's stuff that you feel like, God, I really should know about that.
Yeah.
But then you're listening to this, it's like, oh, it's okay that I don't know, but I'm going to know now and be totally entertained at the same time. So
I love that.
Yeah.
It seems like a really new take. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
That's awesome. So I have 3 picks today too. 3 must be the magic number. 2 essential oils, frankincense and helichrysum. 1, the aroma is to die for. I would not put the 2 together because they, to me, would have conflicting aromas and scents. I don't see the 2 mixing, but separately, they are lovely and divine. Frankincense is really good for, oh my gosh, a whole slew of medicinal properties, and I won't go through it, but I will link to Dr. Axe's website. And it has a very almost woodsy smell, and I just love it. And then the helichrysum actually is a yellow flower, and when you put the oil on your skin, the oil comes out yellow because it's from a yellow flower. So it's floral, and that actually pairs beautifully with lavender. But helichrysum, I just rub on my wrist in the morning and after practice. And if I remember correctly, helichrysum is really good with like rebuilding nerves and ligaments and things like that. It's crazy. Like the things that Mother Nature gives us is mind-blowing.
Excellent.
Yeah. And again, I will link to Dr. Axe there because I do not want to say anything that's not true. And I've been scanning a lot of music lately into my iPad. And so while I've been scanning, I have been listening to flute albums that I've never had the chance to listen to because I've never spent the time like I wanted to. And so one of those albums is Alexis Still's 1993 flute album. And the colors she uses and the repertoire she chooses, I think, is packaged very nicely.
What's on that album?
Burton, Muchinsky, Rockberg. I can't think of others, but it's a hefty list. I mean, she put together easy, like 10 pieces, and each piece, has multiple movements. So it was a good over an hour's worth of music.
Wow. I'll have to check that one out too.
Yeah. Beautiful colors, and she really pulls out the character of each piece very well. So yeah, awesome. Well, Viviana, thank you so much for your time, energy, and talents. And I just cannot thank you enough for the insights you have given me and the listeners.
Well, Heidi, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Viviana. You have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye. Today's bronze sponsorship is brought to you by Aransas Pass High School. Aransas Pass High School is the winner of the Flute 360 Podcast October giveaway. The band and the directors have been working very diligently on their upcoming performances. They would like for you to know about their upcoming concerts, such as the Gregory Portland Tournament of Bands held on October 5th at 1:30 p.m. Also, on October 12th, they have a South Texas Crossroads Marching Festival at Robstown High School at 3:15 p.m. On October 19th, their UIL Region 14 Marching Contest at Sinton High School at 11:30 a.m. In conclusion, they have a Christmas concert on the 9th of December at 6:30 p.m. and an exciting event of their all-region concert at Texas A&M Kingsville on December 14th at 3 p.m. Central U.S. time. If you would like to support the band, please visit www.apisd.org/boosterclub. I know that they would really appreciate the financial support in any amount that you can give. Congratulations again to the school, the students, and the band directors. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.